All right, that was a very silly picture. So, whoops, there we go. All right. And there we go. I think I got it on effectively. I'm not sure where the chat is, as is usual. And as you all pop on here, please feel free to... Oh, there's the chat. I think I found it already. Ha! It's a miracle. Feel free to put something in the chat. And we're going to get started in about 4 minutes. So, yay, we got somebody on here already. So as you jump on, let us know who you are, where you're from, and if you have a question, feel free to let us know what your question is. We're going to have the slightly reduced time this time. We're just going to go an hour tonight because if you're lucky enough to be in the area, I'm going to do a free herb walk here around the gardens with a focus on bioregional, and if there's any Chinese medicine folks in the crowd, we'll throw in some a little bit of both, but we'll throw in some cool Chinese medicine plants as well. We've got a few running around the garden. And I'm assuming this is an announcement on my cell phone from myself. Yay! There we go. All right. So that's what I wanted to see. And all right, we got a few people showing up. We'll get started here in just a minute. Let us know who you are, where you're from. That way, really, mostly it's so that I can find the chat because I don't really know where it is. And we'll get started here shortly. And of course, if you have to cut and run, you can find all of the recordings on Tradition School of Herbal Studies YouTube page. And if you've got any, there we go. I really am in the chat. That's what I wanted to see. So let us know. We've got a couple of questions in the queue, more than enough to get us going. And we'll get started in 3 minutes. So hang out, go get a cold drink. I know I did. We'll get mine all lined up here. I'm going to be talking for the next few hours. And again, if you're in the area, we've got a big plant sale. Hopefully you all are getting your fall gardens ready here. Florida, we have the reverse growing season here. We grow in the fall and winter and don't do quite so much in the winter, in the summertime here, where when we see all the transplants come down here, I don't understand why I'm killing everything, and they keep trying to grow everything in the springtime, and then it dies by the time summer and the 4 billion degrees that it is here. So just a little, we have more growing season, it's just not the same growing season. So let us know who you are, where you're from. If you got any questions, put them in the chat, and I will add it to the list. It's always a trick to see, like, which ones do I do first? I've got a couple, but none of them are vitally important. I shouldn't say that. They're all vitally important. It's all vital information that we all get. All right, it's almost time. We got 2 minutes. Hang tight. We'll get it going here in just a second. I was a slacker. We've had a lot going on lately, so all kinds of exciting, interesting things. Oh, and I'll probably wait till next month before I tell anybody about the exciting stuff coming up. But I think it's exciting. I don't know whether anybody else will or not. So if you are in Florida, I hope that you notice, like I do, that the edge is off the heat and the humidity, because it can get a little rough around here sometimes. It was one of the hottest summers that I remember, and I've been here a lot. So it's a welcome sight, and we've got the drum circle and the market here tonight. So I think this will be the first time. They don't need the fire, but they always do. Even in the middle of summer, they were putting the fire to drum and work around. But I think this will be the first month where it's actually enjoyable to have the fire out there. I know once it gets colder, that will be one of the great joys. I might be muscling in some heat from that fire myself. So please let us know who you are, where you're from, if you got any questions. Oh, look at that. It's 6 o'clock. All right, I'm going to start babbling. Still put your questions in. We got plenty of time. So if you don't know, I'm Bob Linde of the Tradition School of Herbal Studies in sunny St. Petersburg, Florida. Also, I'm an acupuncture physician as well as a registered herbalist with the American Herbalist Guild. And we've got a Western Chinese herbal program as well as clinical practice with lots of awesome herbalists and acupuncturists and other cool stuff. You can find out more at traditionsherbschool.com or acuherbals, 1C, acuherbals.com. And we just put out our newest class list. There are so many cool things coming up in the new year, and a little bit of cool stuff coming up still this year. Oh, let's see if I can do this. There we go. I'm not going to read all this stuff off. You guys can read. Herbal animal care is coming up, not this weekend, but the weekend after. I don't know. That's kind of focused. But do check the website, Traditions School of Herbal Studies, traditionsherbschool.com, to find out all the cool stuff coming up and get registered for those things. The Chinese herbal program is starting in next month. Sometime in November. I couldn't actually tell you when. So be sure, if you're interested in that, to reach out to us, get more information, a lot kinds of good stuff. And if you don't know it, our clinical practice is at 2520 Central Avenue. We've got one of the largest apothecaries in Florida with Western, Chinese, a few Ayurvedic herbs, and a lot of really cool bioregional plants, many of which I grow myself, so, or at least harvest out of my yard or here off the school. We've also got clinicals with our senior practitioners 6 days a week, and our student clinic is 3 nights a week, and hopefully hey Ronnie, I saw that you threatened to jump on here. Awesome. We also, as soon as we get some interns in from Dragon Rises, the local acupuncture school, we'll also have acupuncture interns in there, like we've had for the last 15 years or so. And you can always get in with our Chinese and Western herbalists students that are supervised by me or one of the other senior practitioners. And remember, if you miss all of this, or you get cut off, or you just get bored of hearing my voice, you can listen to this recording and all the last few years on our YouTube page, traditionsherbschool.com. There we go. Oh yeah, Traditions School of Herbal Studies YouTube page. And I thought I would actually start with some interesting questions, and I'll say I see a couple new faces on here. Do feel free to post any questions on there. I've had a lot of questions lately about memory, and I would say, as I get older, despite the fact that I refuse to admit that I'm getting older, I think for all of us, our memory is perhaps not as sharp as it ever was, but also, as we see people starting to have memory issues, Alzheimer's, dementia, things like that, we get really concerned, because my dad struggled with that, and I watched luckily it wasn't as scary as I hear some cases, but in his case it was just the anxiety that he was suffering with, because he couldn't remember literally 1 minute to the next. Luckily he could still recognize me and my brother and other loved ones, so we were lucky with that we didn't have some of the other issues that come with dementia. And I lectured to a group last night, and it was mostly, I'm going to say most of the folks there were probably over 70. There was a few younger folks there like myself, and I guess I was their keynote speaker. La-ti-da. And the theme, it was a seniors awareness month or something. It was sponsored by the city of St. Pete, which I really appreciated. They had some good eats there. They had beautiful displays that were from SUAC, there's all kinds of funny noises coming out there. Getting ready for the market, so you'll see lots of people wandering back and forth. So I'm doing the herb walk here afterwards. There was SUAC, and 15th Street Farms was providing a lot of the greens and things like that. So it was fairly well attended. There's still a few seats left, but they asked me to talk about memory and how herbs could play a role in that. And so, although I brought my herbs with me to hand around and torture them with, I started with some of the things that are more important than the herbs. And these are true. We don't have to have some sort of age-related memory issues. This could be whether you're 15 years old getting ready for your final exams, 30 or 80. Some of these really basic things are kind of important on how do we not only prevent but minimize, those senior moments that all of us have. It's going to sound stupid, some of it. Dehydration. Probably the thing I see for short term, like why am I having a moment, that all of us, and especially in Florida, probably 80% of us don't drink enough water. And if you've never been there before, where you're like, I'm just forgetting everything, and literally you were working out in the yard, sweating a whole bunch. So for seniors especially, I think hydration is of vital importance, but it's important for us at all ages. After that, one of the leading causes is blood sugar. So as your blood sugar levels elevate, or if you're kind of like walking that pre-diabetic line for a long time, it's causing inflammation to your circulatory system, and that's reducing blood flow to your brain. And so we see a direct correlation between elevated blood sugars and cognitive decline, poor memory. If any of you get bored after this and want to do more research on it, a lot of you, if you're in the medical field or dealing with blood sugar issues and so forth, you know type 1 diabetic is something that you're immediately on insulin. And not to say you're born with it, but it's one of those things where it has nothing to do with what you did food-wise. It's either medication, autoimmune, you're born with it, genetic. Type 2 diabetes, where maybe we weren't exercising enough, maybe we weren't eating correctly, or had other convoluted things. That's the one we have most control over. But the one that's just starting to be talked about a little bit, and if you Google it, it'll show up on Mayo Clinic and things like that, is type 3 diabetes, where we see a connection between the blood sugar and that cognitive decline. And so that's a growing body of evidence, and I certainly have seen it in the clinic on numerous occasions. And as we look at inflammation, things that cause inflammation in the brain, poor blood flow, oxygenation, and so forth, alcohol certainly has a correlation between cognitive decline. And for somebody who is starting to deal with memory issues, alcohol should not be a part of the conversation. That just shouldn't be there. And of course, everybody's favorite, smoking. And that's not just cigarettes. That if you're already dealing with cognitive decline or concern because of hereditary predisposition, even a cigar, cigarettes certainly, and I know nobody wants to hear this, the vapes are also, I would argue, perhaps worse in many ways. I have seen a lot of real harm coming from vapes. So the starting point is those things. I will add to that making sure that we have a good complement of healthy fats as a part of our diet, certainly. And so things like incorporating seeds and some nuts into our normal daily dietary practices. Avocado is always a winner. And you know, it's funny, everybody says olive oil. I was like, I love olive oil. I like, what's not to love about all the oils? But the reality is, olive oil's a pressed seed oil. And so, you know, we can also eat all the yummy seeds, not just the oil that's pushed out of it. But olive oil is considered, you know, and I hate to say this, good quality olive oil, if you don't know, it should be in a not see-through container. And I am so guilty of this. Of course, I love cooking with olive oil. I have to constantly stop myself from putting it directly above the stove. You know, there's that little shelf we like to put all of our daily use kind of things up there. And the heat that you're cooking on your stove is causing your olive oil to go bad faster. So you want to, I would actually argue there's, you could put your good oils, your expensive oils in the fridge, or at least keep them away from a window, keep them away from your stove, at least not right on top of it, the way I'm guilty of doing on numerous occasions. So what I find is, after like, yay, we made you stop drinking and smoking and you're exercising, excuse me, and your blood sugar is properly regulated, and as we age, a number of other things start to decline. Our digestion, and I've talked about that so many times on here, I will spare you the gory details of it all, but ultimately all of our secretions, all of our hormones start to decline a little bit as we age. That's kind of considered normal to a point. But one of the things that also declines is our stomach acid. So we see a lot of times the elderly, their appetite goes down, they start complaining of acid regurgitation and things like that, acid reflux. And I'm going to say the majority of people over the age of 70 are on acid reflux medications, and those can be proton pump inhibitors or H2 blockers. but those reduce your ability to absorb certain nutrients, in particular your minerals, which oftentimes can affect your heart and anxiety, and your B vitamins that will specifically affect your energy levels and ultimately your memory. So there's a good correlation between I won't list them all off, most of your B vitamins, B6, B12, I would put pretty high on that list. So generically, I would say if you're going to take a single supplement, a good B complex would be my starting point, especially if you have any, and I mean any kind of digestive issues or any decline in appetite, or you're dealing with fatigue. That would literally be my starting point. After that, I would say look at your healthy fats, ideally getting it through food, but the reality is we're all guilty of eating out on occasion, or maybe not eating making the best choices in our foods, or deep frying it, or barbecuing something, and so we end up with the wrong fatty acids in our body, which can be inflammatory. Certain types of omega-6 fatty acids, and the omega-3s are the ones all the doctors talk about, and correctly so, and we're supposed to have a ratio of those. We get 3, 6, and 9 omega fatty acids, and when the ratio gets goofed up, then we start to get inflammation. And yep, you can go and get some blood work, and ultimately you're going to pay for it out of pocket. But I have a quick screening device, if you will, on how to check if you've got not enough of omega-3 fatty acids. And I'll show off my arms here. So this is the back of my arm, my tricep. And so if you go and you go, oh, that's oddly bumpy. It's almost like you got acne on the back of your arm. That means you don't have enough omega-3 fatty acids. And so if you're not able to do it through food, fish oil or a mixed seed oil, I like Udo's UDO. I'm not paid by them, don't worry. But they tend to be, if you're a vegetarian or vegan, that is a vegan plant oil. And it's not just flax oil, it's a mix of a whole bunch of different oils. And I think that's better. There's lots of other stuff in there than just omega-3 fatty acids. And so I like the more mixed combination, unless you've gone to see somebody or done your research to say, like, oh, I only need this specific oil for a particular other issue on there. So omega-3 fatty acids, and that can be, again, supplement or food, dealer's choice. There's also a growing body, and this one is not clear, but I think for many other reasons, not just for memory, vitamin D levels. And our vitamin D, you don't get a whole heck of a lot from plants, or animals for that matter, and the sunlight is the number one place to get your vitamin D. And you know, most of the time I'm wearing clothes, and when I'm not, I'm usually not outside. My neighbors might not appreciate that if I was. And what we do is, most of us are working inside, and for the elderly, they are frequently inside more, and if they're dealing with memory issues or any kind of Alzheimer's dementia, they're oftentimes in a nursing home where literally they get no sunlight. When we look at the role of vitamin D, not just for cognitive issues, it's vital for our immune system, it is vital for our bone density, and there's showing that there's some real benefits also for our emotional health. And so seasonal affective disorder and similar types of things where we're not getting the sunlight, that, I don't know, I get happy when I see the sun out there. It is better than not. And I'll add to that, so my mainstay is get blood work. It's a very normal thing to request that you get tested periodically. And just because you have a good tan doesn't mean that you have good vitamin D. It is very possible that you have a genetic reason why you don't create vitamin D well. And the other thing is, anybody who has more melanin than me should get tested. Melanin is that thing that makes your skin darker. So anybody of African descent, I would say Asian descent, and even Latin American descent, insert all of the Middle East and Southern Europe, where they're likely to have more melanin, darker skin, because you're closer to the equator. And that melanin protects you from the harmful rays of the sun, but also makes it harder for you to utilize the sunlight. So it is very common to see in the Black community in particular critically low vitamin D, where we see an increased rate of age-related memory issue. We see increased rates of cancer. And if anybody was following the statistics with the current viral COVID stuff, the Black community in particular was hit heavier than any other community, and the elderly. Those were the two groups that didn't just get sick and then went on with their life after a week. Those were the folks who were getting hospitalized and dying. And there's some good research outside of the U.S. and inside of the U.S. that showed that those folks who got critically ill with COVID had under 20 as their vitamin D levels. So the folks who were above 40 were kicking butt, tended to just have a normal cold and flu. I encourage people to reach for a vitamin D level between like 70 and 90, and that'll make sense if you ever get it tested. Like top end is 100, you don't want above 100. That starts to be toxic. And my starting dosage for most folks is 5,000 IUs daily. Hey, Michelle. Where are you at in Florida? See, I turn the switch and I start babbling. And anybody, I see that we've got a bunch of people on here, so please feel free to let us know who you are, where you're from, because I think it's cool. We have people from like way the heck out there. And if you've got any questions, please do post them in here. Otherwise, I just keep babbling, and I got a whole bunch of things I can say. So vitamin D, 5,000 IUs, but please do get it tested, especially for those of us as we're getting older, but also like myself, where we have had immune challenges in the past, and so we really want to look at optimizing that. Sunrise, cool. So now let's talk about the herby stuff. One of the things that's important, and I'm going to say the first couple, I literally don't even think twice about herb-drug interactions. I don't care what's going on. And then I'm going to talk about one that has a potential herb-drug interactions. And interestingly enough, with the crowd I talked to last night, all the seniors, I found at least one person I chatted with was having an adverse reaction to the one herb. So got to stay tuned and find out what that exciting herb is. So rosemary is probably my starting point of just really cool herbs that has a role, I would say, for mild memory issues. And it's almost like a cup of coffee, but without the ookiness. So rosemary can be just aromatherapy. Like, I love growing rosemary. I usually keep it outside my front door. I don't have any there currently. I'm going to remedy that here in the next few weeks. But I would walk out in the morning and I would just rub my hands over the plant and just inhale, and literally you feel your eyes and your sinuses clear, and there's literally a temporary but noticeable clarity and sharpness in your mind. So, there's an old, whoops. Hey, Natalie, there's, with vitamin D in particular, there's literally hundreds of good brands out there. Generically, I say don't buy your supplements from the grocery store. Oklahoma, awesome sauce. All right, so far you win the prize for furthest away for tonight. So with vitamin D, any of them are fine, but I do encourage you to get them from a health food store, generally, whatever's close to you. There's 100 different good companies out there for vitamin D. But I think the more important thing is look at not the vitamin D, but the extra ingredients in there. And so I tend to prefer avoiding palm oil. I prefer avoiding soy. So I look for things that don't have that in there. And you want to look for D3, not D2. And after that, there's a whole slew of opinions of what's right or wrong. Some people prefer liquid, some capsules. If you're vegan, you have to work a little bit harder because a lot of vitamin D is not vegan. On the B complex, I like either food-based or methylated. And again, looking at the extra ingredients and making sure that it has all of the B vitamins. And again, there are tons of them out there. Some are vegan and some are not. And for some people, I'm not vegan or vegetarian and don't generally push people in that direction. but I know many people are, especially health conscious folks who are on here. And so it's important to recognize that not all supplements are going to meet that criteria for being vegan for them. So reading labels, I think, goes a long way. And with B vitamins, you do have to be careful. It's the reason I actually personally prefer food-based vitamins. And yes, we source all the good ones at the clinic. The ones I personally take are actually at the clinic. And a lot of those you can't get in the general public. You have to go through a doctor or acupuncturist. With B vitamins, some of those, if they're highly processed, very chemically based, it doesn't make them bad, but it makes it really hard on the stomach. So a lot of times with B complex, you have to take it or with food in your stomach. I prefer the food-based ones. The numbers sometimes aren't, it's not 800,000 times your recommended daily allowance of B12, but I can take it on an empty stomach. I can safely say my focus, and I'm going to spare us all methylation issues in the process, but I can safely say that if I forget my B vitamins in the morning, by noon, I'll consistently walk into a room and go like, what was I in here for again? And so B vitamins really, I find personally, makes a dramatic difference to all of it. We are all natural, non-GMO, organic, sweet. Yeah, that sounds perfect. And so those are all non-GMO I'm a fan of. Natural is kind of a generic term that really doesn't mean anything. Organic, if it's certified USDA, that is definitely improved. And it sounds like if it's USDA certified, then you're most likely getting a food-based vitamin that I personally, that's what I take. So probably a good choice. Oops, and wait a second, I almost missed something here. Hey, Jasmine, Florida, Chris. All right, let me hold off on the frankincense, but I'm going to add that to the list because I can say stuff. All right. So rosemary, yes, making a tea out of rosemary, that's all you need to do. And I will say the plant is not the same as the essential oil. I do not recommend anybody put essential oils inside their body. And if it's going topically, that it should be in a carrier oil. And it's intense. Like I will say, essential oils do stuff, but they're not the same as the herb. So if you say this herb is good for, that doesn't mean that the essential oil is good for the same thing. They're very different animals when we look at them. So Shakespeare once said, rosemary is for remembering. And I've repeated that because everybody else has always said it. And I was like, I can't say I've read all of Shakespeare. I was like, I should go look that up. You can go on the internet and you can look that kind of stuff up. And so it's actually, we're kind of misquoting it when we say that. And I am so guilty of that for the last 20, 30 years or so. It's actually for remembering your past, and it's remembrance and has to do with death. So it's about remembering your relatives. And so it is a cognitive thing, but it is more about your connection to your ancestors, which I think is actually makes it even cooler plant than it already is. That said, we do find that it's, fancy word of the day, rubefacient, which means it brings blood to the surface. It kind of, it doesn't thin the blood, but it stimulates it in a very nice way and perfuses or brings it up into the brain and the microcirculation of the body. So drinking it as a tea is lovely. Personally, I love and it sounds like a weird combination, but at least for me, and I do like strong flavors, I like it with lemongrass. It is literally one of my favorite summertime teas. It's very cooling. It gets rid of, I tend towards phlegmy, and it's very helpful, and I can say stuff about Borrelia, so yay. So it's a nice simple combination. I'm going to say, and I think I've talked about this on some of the other ones in the past, one of my go-tos for people going through chemotherapy, and it's like, I think now I'm up to like 2/3 of my practice is people dealing with cancer, which sucks for everybody. It's a rough focus to have in my clinical practice. But you'd think they're worried about dying, they're worried about the difficulties of chemo or surgery, whatever. The number one thing people say is, I don't want to lose my hair, I don't want to look sick. And I was like, I got you for that. So using a strong rosemary tea, spraying it into your hair after you shower, massaging it in, and leaving it in. If you do that every single day while you're going through chemo, 80% of my people keep all of their hair with very little loss whatsoever. For those of you with dark hair, it's also a natural colorant. I obviously need to start using it. So there's starting to be some gray up there. I don't know where that stuff came from. They say I'm getting older, but I don't believe them. But it also, because it does help with our cognitive function, our memory, it also helps with chemo brain. So it is one of my favorite go-tos, and again, it's yummy. It is, you can throw it in your food, you can do all that, but a strong tea, fresh or dried, it doesn't matter. And I usually just say store it in the fridge, so you just have to make it every couple of days. Bacopa is one that people hear about a lot. There we go. On there. Yeah, I don't know if I spelt it right, but Mononaria is close. This is a Florida native plant. This grows in marshy areas. You'll actually find it in the low spot of a lawn, or if you go for water, you'll find this on the edges in up to 4 inches of water, right on the edge of waterways and ponds around here. I'll find it in drainage ditches, and is used in a lot of fish tanks, and freshwater fish tanks. It does not taste real yummy, and it has an interesting benefit. And so not only does it help with memory, and it's not really sure how it works, but I would say it's cooling and moistening. It also helps us with focus and has a slight relaxation effect. Doesn't even seem like the right word, but it was classically given to boys because we misbehave, especially when we're in school. And so in India, it was grown, and you would grind it up fresh, make like a little mush with it, and feed it to your child. Not limited to boys, but boys are the ones who bounce around a little too much. And so it was given to boys to make them focus and learn better whilst they're in school. But it is a go-to for folks who tend to be drier in nature, and so cooler and drier, where they're warm and dry, not cool and dry. So people who tend to be a little warm and dry, they're the ones cranking the AC down, maybe night sweats, hot flashes. That can be beneficial, and I usually will combine it with Gotu Kola, which is also known as Centella. And I'm going to just say there's a couple of species of Centella. We have one that's native here, Erectus, and then we also have the Asiatica, which is the herb of commerce, that honestly grows wild here now. It's now, I would say, naturalized, and they work identically. I find the taste changes more based on where it grows rather than which species. I think Gotu Kola tastes really good. It is for connective tissue disorders, so it is also one of my go-tos for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome or any kind of connective tissue disorder. But I found that it is reducing the inflammation in the brain and the tissues around the tissues around the brain. I can't even think of the name of it. Oh my God, brain cramp. I obviously need some Gotu Kola. I was literally looking for it beforehand. The Dura, there we go. The Dura coverings over the head. I knew it was in my brain somewhere. So I tend to combine Gotu Kola and Bacopa together. Gotu Kola is more drying, where Bacopa is more moistening, and then I change the ratio based on the nature of the person. Oh, there you go. I probably at the next American Herbalist Guild conference, I'm going to put in to lecture about EDS and connective tissue disorders. I got a couple of things that are on my radar that I'm kind of fired up about, and connective tissue disorders is something maybe for the last 1 or 2 years I've just seen. I think I've noticed it. And so some of the subclinical EDS issues, that's short for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome for the rest of you are like, what the hell did he just say? It's just too hard to say that, or connective tissues. But Gotu Kola can be a phenomenal help with that, but also for autism. And anywhere in that autism spectrum disorder, we find that food sensitivity is, I'm going to say, ubiquitous for all of those folks, and some sort of cognitive issue. It could be anywhere from nonverbal to just challenges with brain stuff. The dosage of the Gotu Kola is whatever. The more you can get them in, the better. I've heard of using up to 50 grams daily. I know that sounds like a lot, but it's called a salad or a stir fry. Like, how many grams of spinach do you put in your cooked spinach that you put on the side of any other dish? So I think of it as a cooked green. Certainly here in Florida, and I hate to say it, I haven't grown anywhere other than Florida, but it is so easy to grow large amounts of it. You can grow it in a pot, you can put it in a raised bed, or literally just get it out there. There's a lot of misidentification that goes with that, so I do encourage you to really don't just say, "Ooh, I Googled it," or I even see the plant apps misidentify it. So it's frequently confused with the dollarweed or pennywort. So, and I hate to say, I've seen really well-known herbalists make that mistake as well, and it's kind of embarrassing. Once you see the two side by side, you have to come on an herb walk. Yay! Once you see the two side by side, you'll never mistake it again. They're clearly different, and yet, because I think people don't grow a lot of plants we talk about, I'm kind of nutso like that. I like playing in the dirt and growing all the plants, no matter how obscure they are. I feel like I know them better when I watch them grow. So those two, I'm going to go fast through the next two because you guys are asking good questions. I want to talk about those. Great question, Sherry. I find the seeds next to impossible to work with. Get a plant. Or like, once you know how to identify it, if you're in Florida, like literally just go wander around, you'll find it. I found them in the nastiest parts of town. I find them out in the wild. Very common to find in the near wetter areas in the parks. Of course, that would be illegal to harvest anything from the parks, but maybe the park has it for sale, or they have an area you can harvest from, or they don't care. And just take one or two plants and you're able to propagate it. Some of the plant nurseries do carry it. I do find it. I source a lot of my plants from Strictly Medicinals, that's actually out west in the Northwest. I trust that when I order from Richo, that I'm getting the right genus and species. Like, he gets weird genus and species sometimes, but I feel secure. I've gotten goofed up by buying from a few plant companies in the past where I thought they were legit, and the reality is they were selling plants where the genus was the same. Hey, what up, stranger? The genus was correct, but the species was wrong, and it gets embarrassing when I trusted that was the right genus and species, and then somebody who knows more stuff than me corrects me, and I check them, and they're like, "Oh crap, you're right." I also have had one case of somebody who sold me wild ginger, a sarum, as a giant Gotu Kola, and I hate to say it, I think he's going around selling it to a lot of people and probably eating it himself and doing harm. I found it after he had dropped off a couple of plants for me, and I was like, that's not Gotu Kola. I don't consider myself a great, I'm a better herbalist than botanist, but I know the plants I know, and I knew that was wrong. You can also by tasting it, wild ginger is toxic. It has I think it's aristolochic alkaloids in there, which do cause damage long term. And when you eat it, it's very acrid and unpleasant, where Gotu Kola has a mild bitterness to it, sometimes almost sweet. I could sit there and eat a handful of it raw and not think twice about it. Lion's mane. Let's talk about lion's mane. I know it's all the rage, and there's decent research to support it. I will say that lion's mane ideally is dual processed, but if you just cook it, you'll get benefit out of it. To get the memory benefits out of lion's mane, you do need to keep taking it, and that's a pain because it's like, oh great, now I got to take another pill. And the reality is we shouldn't have to exist on pills. We should be able to get it through food or plants, or in this case mushrooms, that we harvest. Lion's mane is a type of shaggy mushroom, or hairy mushroom I hear it called sometimes, and those grow pretty much everywhere, and you can grow them yourselves. If you've ever seen those like little blocks of compressed stuff and it comes preceded with the mycelium, lion's mane is one of those that you can buy. Tends to grow on hardwoods. Here in Florida, you'll find them in Central Florida, grown on the hardwoods in the shade, as most mushrooms, and it's usually in an injured part of the tree. So if you go around and look, hardwood forest, obviously they're thriving if it's more rainy in that cool part of the day. So here's where it gets interesting. Most of the research is 500 to 1,000 milligrams. So basically 1 or 2 big capsules, and nothing wrong with doing that. I think it's totally fine to do the capsules in this case. I like dual extracted tincture, but here where it gets interesting. So any of you are around St. Pete, there's a great restaurant. I don't make it there very often, but Sol, S-O-L, that's down on 22nd Street, and I have no idea what avenue. And they sell, and I'm sure they're not the only place, but they'll sell they have vegan and non-vegan food there, so their lion mane steak is one of their common things on their menu, and it's like a 6 or 8 ounce steak, and you sit down, you get your knife and fork, and it's processed, it's cooked, and you sit there and you eat that whole thing. So like my brain should be this big after eating that. The reality is that's not usually what happens. I wish, maybe I'm a little smarter at the end of the meal. So what I encourage people to do is, rather than buying another bottle of pills, because they get expensive very quickly, and Lynn, I'm going to come back to that. Hopefully I'm going to talk faster. Damn it, there's not enough hours in the day. If you cook it and make it in bones broth or something similar to that, put in enough lion's mane to get a hearty dosage for a month. Cook up a couple of quarts of bone broth with all the other good herbs in there and good bones. And if you don't do bones, if you're vegan, throw in all the mushrooms, not just the lion's mane. Then divide that into 1 week containers and do about a half cup of that every single day. And whether you're just throwing it back and drinking it, whether you're cooking that into a pot of rice, however, way cheaper, way better quality, and you'll probably get a larger amount. And really that improved memory recall of lion's mane that we read the research about, it goes away shortly after you stop taking it. So you really do want to try to make that as a ongoing part of your diet. It's not like you'll all of a sudden get stupid if you forget for a day, otherwise I'm in trouble, but it's definitely one of those things to try to get it into your diet. You can also powder it, and like you're making mashed potatoes, you're making soup, throw that into your soup as a soup thickener or just a nice gentle earthy flavor. But the last one I want to talk about really fast is ginkgo biloba. Ginkgo, as most people know it, it is a Chinese herb as well, baigo ye, and it is good and bad. So it definitely helps with stuff, I'm going to say, in your head and neck, but it has 2 problems. It does have blood thinning properties, and I mentioned I saw a woman last night that she was getting bruising, and she was taking aspirin, and then this is where the one doctor told her to take aspirin because she'd had a stroke, and another doctor said, oh, you should take ginkgo, that's good for your memory, and you're old, which I would have kicked him repeatedly at that point. But obviously the doctor was not an herbalist and didn't understand that it was going to cause too much thinning of the blood. And all of a sudden, after about a month after taking the ginkgo, she started to get easy bruising, where we've all seen folks that are too much blood thinners. They get these big splotchy bruises all over her arm, and she was getting that from the ginkgo. But the thing that's most important to remember about ginkgo, and whether it be memory or ears or eyes or anything else, is ginkgo only works if you're phlegmy. If you're that thin, dry person, it will do nothing or piss you off. And all the research, there's been a fair number of studies on ginkgo for memory primarily, and what they found was it worked 50% of the time. But they just said, here's old people with poor memory, take this herb, tell us what happens, and gave them a few tests. They didn't differentiate based on an energetic or constitutional concept. And even though herbalists who actually know what they're doing know that, there still hasn't been any studies. I wish I had time to do research studies like that. So if you tend to be a phlegmy person, your tongue has that thick, greasy tongue coating, that's my short answer. See an herbalist. But in which case, then, it is effective if you're that phlegmy person. And it's funny, it has a wealth of other benefits in the head specifically if you're phlegmy. It will help tinnitus if it's due to phlegminess. It will help vision, and dogs more than people, but dogs get like crusty eyes a lot of times. That's phlegminess. Sniff your dog's ear. If it smells like Frito corn chips, they're phlegmy. That's usually yeasty stuff. So good herb, but with cautions. It's one of those herbs you would not take if you're getting surgery or anything like that. All right, I'm going to skip those. And frankincense. So, and I totally forgot who asked me about frankincense, but frankincense it's another one that's good and bad. So frankincense, myrrh, if you read Christian thought, were two of the three gifts of the Magi that brought the gifts to a postpartum mom, right? Forget the whole Jesus thing. And so frankincense and myrrh is specific. I have an audience here in person now too, and besides the people just walking back and forth. So the reality is frankincense and myrrh are so appropriate for the acute trauma that is childbirth, that also is helpful for pain and swelling. So it doesn't have to be childbirth. It's super appropriate for any kind of acute injury. There's some decent research to help with healing, non-healing wounds. It is one of those things. It is a Chinese herb, ruzhang, that we say it generates flesh. Trying to type that in, ruzhang. I will add that for non-healing wounds, I particularly like frankincense, very specifically frankincense, more so than myrrh. And I'll spare you the gory deed. You could use either one. It's fine. But to combine it with astragalus, angelica dongguai, and plantain with frankincense, I've literally packed non-healing wounds and had them quickly reverse and start to heal. Make sure you don't just randomly start doing that. Make sure you know what you're doing and making that as clean as possible. As a herb, it's challenging to work with because it's a tree resin. We need a very high proof alcohol in order to extract it into a tincture. And if you just throw it in some boiling water, all you're going to get is frankincense melted and permanently stuck onto the bottom of your pan. I speak from experience on that one. I've ruined some perfectly good pans with frankincense back in the day. So you can grind it up and eat it. You can grind it up and put it in a capsule. If you're going to work with it whole, like grinding it up, put it in the freezer for a few hours first, and then it will shatter. If it's at room temperature, it's still a little sticky. It's also used for spiritual practices, so frankincense will burn, as most tree resins do, and we see that, I'm sure, in many religious practices. I always think of the Greek Orthodox Church when they got the, is it a scimitar? Censer. Censer? Okay, cool. See, I learn something new every day.
Censure.
Oh, yes, censure. Yes. And tree resins are frequently used to start and stop ceremonies and to clean the space and set the tone. And so this is a classical one. Now I'm going to say the bad stuff. Frankincense is super popular. And so it is in a very slow growing and ancient trees that grow in a very narrow range, primarily in the Middle East or in that latitude. And because A, it's expensive, and B, it's very popular, it has been over-harvested, and the trees are starting to die from the over-harvesting, as well as the expansion of the Sahara Desert and change in global temperatures. This is going to be an herb that's going to be challenging to source 20 years from now, and that's a sad statement. Or it will be cost prohibitive. Dragon's blood has become, another tree resin, has become cost prohibitive for the exact same reasons. I used to get it for $50 a pound. It's well over $300 a pound wholesale. Luckily I had a lot in stock before the prices went wackadoodle. So it is an herb that is extremely effective. It's also used for acid reflux, non-healing ulcers in the body. But I think it should not be our first choice unless it's so specific. And although it's certainly appropriate to use it for religious ceremonies, I encourage people to use other tree resins. Everybody forgets about sweet gum, birch, maple, pine. All of those are tree resins that have a tradition as smudge, and there's 50,000 other ones. All of those have a resin that can be sourced, extracted, and used for medicine. And they don't have the same physical medicine purposes, but they have similar spiritual medicine purposes. So I think it's important we recognize that there are a number of plants that are in vogue, and on TikTok, that maybe we should be using sparingly and using something more gentle if it's available, or more prolifically easy to grow and source if it's available. And then Perelia. Yes. Yeah.
You mentioned astragalus mixed with plantain, and there was something.
Oh, Angelica Dongguai. Sorry. So he asked what were the other herbs I like for non-healing wounds. So astragalus. I hope I'm a terrible spellist. Astragalus plantago. So not the banana, but the weed plantago. Oops. Helps if I put a comma between these. Otherwise, that will sound like one freaky species. And Angelica Dongguai, which is a Chinese herb. There we go. There's my pseudo spelling. I think I'm pretty close on those. So Perelia. So this is in the mint family. There are three types that I'm sure there's more types than that. There's three types of Perelia that are generally used. There's the purple Perelia, that is the Chinese herb that's purple Perelia. Good thing I can type while I talk, huh? This is also used in culinary purposes in Japan, in more classical places. If you get sushi, it's frequently got sliced purple Perelia in there, or an actual leaf, because we use it specifically in combination with ginger for seafood poisoning. So of course, when we buy sushi, you get pickled ginger, and traditionally had the purple Perelia leaves. So we're already giving you the treatment for the seafood poisoning you might be getting from this crappy fish. So that it is outside of that. Perelia is in the mint family. The green, and I should say that there is a purple one where it's mostly purple on the underside, green on top. There is a green one which is considered milder in flavor and more culinary and just yummy. It's kind of like funky basil. And then there's a frilly leafed or curly leafed. It's got a little ridge that is considered edible but more ornamental, as far as I know. I've worked with that one the most, but that's kind of like, oh, that's really cool looking. And they're an annual, technically, here in Florida. I can keep that sucker going for a couple of years usually if I really tend to it. But you asked specific. Oh, and I'll say it's in the mint family, so it's in the Laminaceae family. So it's an aromatic. It's got the serrated edge, opposite, alternating leaves, all that cool stuff. We'll use it for any kind of digestive issues. It's a nice carminative, especially if it's a bloated drum-like abdomen when you eat or from stress that affects your diet. And you asked specifically about the seed, I believe. So now I'm going to have fun with you. So the is the leaf of Perilia. The is the seed, and we use that for phlegmy cough and helps to break up phlegm. It is also used. There's some newer research out, and I wish I could say I was up on all the research. I've seen it used for hormone issues for women in particular. I have not used it for that. You can now buy Perilia oil. When we were talking about omega-3 fatty acids earlier, I mentioned Udo's brand 369 was the name of it, and they have a variety of seed oils. The Perilia oil is in there Perilia seed oil is in there as well. I'm sure you can buy the oil. Generically, I would say I would only use it for phlegm, and that's for me. If you studied with me, if you studied energetic medicine in any tradition, Ayurvedic, Chinese, Western, if they talked about hot, cold, wet, dry, deficient, excess, tense, and lax, those ideas, any of the Perilia plant, any part of it, and we actually use 4 different parts of the Perilia plant for slightly different functions. All of them would include phlegm. And so I would look for, the research says it's good for, and I hate to say it, I don't remember which hormone it's good for. But I would say look for a symptom that is related to phlegm. It could be used for any lumpy thing is going to be phlegm. That I want to say that's my short answer, and it's one of those, the seeds we just don't work a whole lot with, and so I don't have a jar full of Perilia seeds. I grow the plant and harvest the leaves, and then I also buy them separately, and the Perilia seed is the thing we probably work with the least. The leaf is pretty common to use. Occasionally we use it. Oh, and there was one more question. I know I just looked at it, and then I got ADD and didn't do it. So I'm going to take this last question, I think. The bitter melon leaf tincture 80 proof vodka to be as effective as eating the leaves. That's actually a great question. So if you don't know, bitter melon is literally rampant. We'll look at it on the herb walk here in a few minutes. It is a common tropical plant. And it's funny, if you go to the Asian market, you can buy bitter melons, warty looking cucumber. Here, the bitter melon that we grow is the Caribbean varietal, and there's a third varietal that you don't see as often that is the Indian, in Asia, India. And they eat the fruit of that one as well. Here, our Caribbean one, we're more likely, you can eat the green fruit, but once it turns orange, you don't eat it. But the leaf is the primary medicine for us here. And so what you're talking about in the islands, it's called Surasey, and that's Jamaica and a few of the other islands. Depending on what island you go to and what their heritage is, they will have some version. I believe in Puerto Rico is the one, I think it's Cunda Amor in Puerto Rico, and Cuba might have the same name. So I still think the fresh leaf is better than a tincture, and I would argue a tea of it might even be better than a tincture. When we look at the components on there, without a doubt, some of them are water soluble, some of them are alcohol soluble, but more traditionally used in water extraction or just eaten. It's primarily used for blood sugar regulation, but and it's funny, you chose 80 proof alcohol, which is a higher water content, but enough alcohol to preserve the constituents of the leaf. So that is a better choice. here in Florida, like, I always pick some, keep it dried. I don't tincture it usually, but I was like, oh, I probably should, especially while there's so much growing right now. And if you don't know it, the green fruit you can eat, and they're small, about the size of a ping pong ball or something. If it's green, you can cut it open, scrape out the seeds. You can eat it. It is nasty, just like the leaves. It will, and it's funny. When I grew up in the Bahamas, and one of the things they would say, you would eat 3 leaves a day to cool the blood, and that was not from an herbalist. That's what everybody knew there. You just got to eat 3 leaves a day to cool the blood. If you're running hot, that's what you take. We know, researchy now says, ooh, diabetes and things like that. It's also antifungal, antiparasitic. The seeds are the best part of the antiparasitics, except that's not in a fun way, because the seeds are purgative, i.e. it will cause explosive cramping diarrhea. So I would personally find a more gentle approach if it was me. And the red pulp that's around the seeds actually is high in lycopene, and if you suck the pulp off of that, it will take away the bitter taste, and you just have to spit out the seed. And so, I'm guessing some of these folks are here for the herb walk, so we'll try to do that and not kill anybody in the process. And I'm going to, and so yes, the short answer is I think fresh is better. 80 proof is probably the best choice. Maybe wilt the leaves just for like an hour before you put them in there, and make it a strong extraction, and that should actually be a great tincture and a heck of a lot more convenient. So if you don't know, thank you so much for hanging out. It's going to be a short one tonight, only an hour, because I'm going to go do an herb walk out back, because I think the folks are arriving. And so this is the Herbal Open Forum. We do it the last Friday of every month. Normally it's 2 hours, but yay, sometimes I gotta get called away. You can find a recording of this on our YouTube channel, Tradition School of Herbal Studies. Also, I just recorded my 3rd podcast, Mastering Herbalism with Bob Linde. You can find it with all the usual platforms. And this one I interviewed myself, and we talked primarily about cancer and herbs. My next one is going to be using herbal care with children. I'm going to be doing a little interview style with Ruthie. Also, you can find out more about the school and all the cool classes and programs at traditionsherbschool.com. And if you want to visit either the student clinic or the practitioner's clinic, you can find more at AcuHerbals, AcuHerbals.com. We're there 6 days a week. And if you're around, come join us here at the Blue Raven Market and Drum Circle and Herb Walk that's going to start in about 4 minutes. And tomorrow at the clinic, 2520 Central Avenue, you can come and look at all the cool herbs, but we're also having a plant sale from 9 until 4 tomorrow. So I hope you join us there, and we'll see you next month. How do I turn this thing off? There we go.
Did you say you did